Very much.
Okay. Right. So, how can I get started? So, like, web scraping is like one of those things that I kind of, I sort of tinker like many Python people, right? In my spare time, I come up with things I want to do, and I try to do them, and like a lot of the time, I'll have some question, but the data won't be like freely available. You know, that's basically a situation I find myself in all the time, and in those cases, you know, usually I can find some website that has the stuff I want, but it's like, you know, how do I get this in a CSV as fast as possible? Becomes my question, or like JSON also okay. And that's pretty much what this talk's going to be about. So it's just going to be like, you know, I've got some website that knows stuff that I want to know. How do I like squeeze it out, pretty much. But just to introduce myself, so my name's Caleb. I grew up in Auckland, went to Auckland Uni. I did my maths degree in like 2015 or so. And I went to Wellington to work for a couple of years. I worked for like a year and a half in the, I worked for like 2 years in the public sector. I worked for Stats NZ. Like I did kind of privacy stuff, and I also did environmental statistics. And then I switched over to Dragonfly, which is where I work now. And we're basically like a data science consulting company that's based in Wellington. I don't think we have much presence up here, so I don't know, maybe someone's heard of us or maybe you haven't, but the general idea is like we like reproducible science, we like open source, we like Bayesian statistics, and like more recently, I'm sure Dragonfly's been doing machine learning for a while before I got there, but yeah, so I do mostly machine learning stuff at Dragonfly. I don't do much web scraping for work, but as you'll see, like I do it in my spare time mostly. Yeah. Right. So everything I'm about to show you guys is all on this repo that I made. It's called Intro to Scrapy. It's on the Dragonfly, Dragonfly Science repo. Account, whatever. And yeah, so basically I've set it up so that it should be reproducible. If you're on a Linux machine or a Mac, it shouldn't be too hard to get the code running yourself, so long as you've got Docker and Make installed. And if you're on Windows, I've got instructions at the bottom, like for how to run it anyway, which is like a bit of extra work, but yeah. So it's like, so if you're on Linux, it's like literally these two commands. And then it does a whole bunch of wizardry that like you'll get to see. But if you're on Windows, then you'll have to install a bunch of things and like make sure your environment's all set up and whatever. But I tell you what you need, which I think is important. So I guess I should probably start prodding, to see like general ability kind of stuff, so I know like where to aim the talk at. So general questions, like who's tried web scraping before? Anyone? Yep. Of everyone, keep your hands up if you used BeautifulSoup. Yeah, so that's most people. Has anyone tried Scrapy before? No. Yeah, okay, 1. Okay. 2. Right. Yeah, 3. Okay. 4, perhaps. Cool. Yeah, so that seems to be my experience. Most people have done BeautifulSoup, and before I tried Scrapy, I tried BeautifulSoup as well, and it worked for what I was doing. But I don't know, like I started on Scrapy and then I basically never looked back. I was like, yeah, this is way better, I thought. And like to some extent, I'll try to convince you guys of that too. But like, it turns out Scrapy really nice when you get using it. So am I ready to? Okay. So like Python programming skills, raise your hand and be humiliated if you consider yourself a beginner. I'm kidding. There's no shame in being a beginner. Okay, right, good. And then intermediate up, I think, will be all right, following what I'm saying. Yeah, so also any questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to keep an eye on your faces to try and see what everyone's thinking, but I'll just get into it. So let's try that. Okay. Right, so here's my slides. Web scraping with Scrapy. Right, so start off talking about, obvious motivation stuff. Or there's also stuff you should know. So basically, if you haven't done web scraping before, if you go and do it like without thinking too hard, then you might do things that are questionably legal, which is, I'll talk a bit about that. And then the other thing that I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to go through an example. So basically, I'm going to talk about how I would go about scraping code from a website. And that should be really useful. In fact, that was one of the things I found frustrating about learning Scrapy in the past. It's the documentation exists, but there isn't really much out there that describes a kind of workflow, and I tend to find that more useful when I'm learning a new package. It's there's the documentation, but then there's the how do I do the thing? If I write some code and it doesn't work, then where do I look? That sort of thing. So I'll be going over that, and then there'll be some kind of results at the end, basically what did we learn? Right, so what the heck is web scraping? Yep, I've pretty much described that. How do you get data from websites online? Probably now's an okay time to mention the pretty big caveat, which is that Scrapy is pretty much a HTML only web scraping tool. So if you're scraping from a website that's JavaScript heavy, then you'll want to use something else like Selenium. I've seen people talk about somehow getting Scrapy to work with Selenium, but I don't know. I have a feeling that results are mixed, as to how well that goes. And for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, basically JavaScript controls all the interactive parts of every web page. So if you click a button and it changes color or does something fancy, then that's usually JavaScript's fault. And Selenium is a library that it basically emulates your browser. So you've got a library that pretends that it's a browser, and then it pretends to load up the page inside, and then you might run code that clicks on a button, and then it will run the JavaScript underneath to make whatever's supposed to happen. And that's kind of the domain that Scrapy is not really in. So usually what I use Scrapy for is basically to automate shifting through pages, you've got some website and each page has some information you want, but you have to have a way to step from one page to the next, and then for each page you want to get the data you want. So that's what Scrapy is really good at. Yeah, so you can use Scrapy, and these are projects that I've got online on my personal GitHub to do things take trade me pages and then turn them into, kind of tidy CSVs, which is something I've done before. And then you can also take other websites that exist as a catalog of some interesting piece of information, such as the lotto results, and you can turn them into something like this, which is JSON. So what have we got here? You got the date that the draw happened, and then all the raw results, and then you've even got the table all pulled in. The results for each division and all that sort of thing. Pulling the table was the most annoying bit, actually, because it was annoying, but it was still one night, that I managed to do all of this, so it's not that bad. Yeah, and the example that I'm going to go through is we're going to try and scrape baby names from huggies.co.nz. This is an actual website. If you go to huggies.co.nz/babynames. Then you get this interesting website that shows you maybe you should name your child this, and this is the country it comes from, and it's a boy or a girl name, that sort of thing. So this is the goal. And I guess for the sake of trying to understand it from if I'm looking at a page and my goal is to web scrape it, then what sort of bits am I looking for? And those things are, obviously you've got the data here, which is what I want, the stuff at the bottom. And then you've also got these by letter buttons, which you kind of want to paginate through. So you want to cycle through all of the different letters of the alphabet so that they can so that you can get the baby names for each one. And they're not shown on this page, but at the bottom, there's like another page thing, pages 1 to 200, for every letter, that sort of thing. So that sort of thing's going on there.
So there are 2 dimensions.
Yeah, that's right. So you're just, you want to get, for every letter, you want to get every page, and for every page, you want to get every name, and possibly every gender, that sort of thing. So first, caveats. It's a fairly long list, but, it's worth being thorough, especially if you're starting off. Because if you're someone like me who's like a bit of a hacker, not in the pejorative sense, and you just kind of decide, I want to get something, and then you just write your code naively, then you'll probably trip more than one of these at once. And so I'll talk about them now. So the first one is that if there is a public API, use that instead. So a lot of websites, they have an API that you can connect to that serves the information that they want users to be able to scrape. And also importantly, it serves it usually in a throttled kind of way where you can't get all of Twitter all at once. You can only get in dribs and drabs, which keeps their servers online and that sort of thing. So that's why if there is a public API, you should use that. The next thing is providing a user agent string. So this is the sort of thing that if you just naively write web scraping code, you won't know what that is. And that can be a problem. But basically, when you send requests to a website, in the header you can include your user agent, which on a normal session will be the details of your browser, if you're using Firefox and that sort of stuff. But in the case of in the web scraping context, usually what you do is try to identify yourself and then provide details so that the website owner can contact you if your code is causing problems, basically. So if you do this naively, you might hit the site too hard, and then you could bring the website down, and then the webmaster will be like, hey, who's this stranger? And that's the thing. That's the sort of thing where you can be misconstrued for a denial of service attack or something. So provide a user string. That's the ethical thing to do. Request data at a reasonable rate. That's another thing that's easy to muck up. So if you're just writing, when you run code normally, it just tries to run as fast as it can run, right? If you've got more megabytes per second on your connection, it might as well use them, right? That's how this usually works. And so Scrapy is great because you can actually control how you throttle your requests, you can choose how many concurrent connections you're allowed to make, and you can set delays between requests and all that sort of stuff really easily. So that's good. And the other reason I've used Scrapy before was because one time we were scraping an API, with the owner's permission, we had, it was a part of a project that we were doing together, but he'd set up this API, and he set it up, at first it was on a real beefy server. So my colleague, he wrote a bunch of async IO stuff just to hit it as hard as we could to get all that data out as quick as possible. And then what happened was the bill was getting too high, so he scaled down the server, and then the code was just exploding every time I tried to run it. So I'd try to get all the, in this case it was audio recordings, and every time I tried to scrape them, I just got errors and errors and errors because it was trying too hard to get all the data, and then the server would fall over, and then So I basically, in that scenario, I switched to Scrapy just so that it would control that stuff for me. So also only save the data you need, fairly straightforward. Request any content you keep, respect any content you keep, don't pass it off as your own. Look for ways to return value to the site owner, credit the site owner. If they contact you because they know how to, because you put your email in your user agent because you're a good person, then respond in a timely fashion to any outreach. To be perfectly honest, I've never had any contact from a website owner or anything for any of the stuff that I've scraped, even in instances when I might have written a scraper that was really fast. Which, like, I don't know, it's pretty tempting to do that, actually, just because, like, you become, like, obsessed with your power, you know, you're like, oh, you know, I can get it in 10 minutes, but can I get it in 1? Yeah, so that sort of thing happens, so just bear that in mind. Yeah, and the read more here, that points to, like, a good blog post that kind of details a bunch of these things, so, yeah, that's all right. Robots.txt, right, so websites, a lot of them, most of them in fact, will have a robots.txt file. So like any website you can think of, google.com/robots.txt likely exists. trademe.co.nz/robots.txt definitely exists. Yeah, so websites, they have this file called robots.txt, and basically what it does is it describes which parts of the website you're allowed to scrape and which you're not. Like, the reason why lots of websites have robots.txts is because Google is a web scraper, and so they use it to you know, either allow or disallow which parts of the web page Google is allowed to look at, and the same towards other search engines like Baidu and that sort of thing. Sometimes if you like go digging around like robots.txt files for like certain websites, you might find interesting things, you know. You might find names of bots that, like, you know, that get mentioned, and, you know, disallow blah blah blah, you know, this thing, bad behavior list, you know, that sort of thing happens, which is quite fun. But in this case, what I've listed here is like kind of the top bit of the huggies.co.nz robots.txt. And basically it says this, so for all user agents are not allowed to go here or here. Yeah? So if you're scraping huggies.co.nz, they don't want you to look at hot milk promo sign up /new or their huggies.co.nz/Facebook. They don't want you to look at that either. Yeah, and then the sitemap is like a link to an XML document that should describe like the structure of the website as a whole that like you can use, but I usually don't use it. Yeah, so we would have been stumped if this robots.txt included, you know, disallow /baby names / you know. If it had that, then it would be like, well, like at that point it's like, well, if you do scrape the website, then like you're pretty blatantly ignoring what they want. It's worth mentioning that robots.txt, it's not like enforced, you know, like it's just a thing that exists that, you know, they try to tell you what they're happy with and what they're not, so like you should follow it. Yeah, but yeah, so we're allowed, so that's great. Any questions about that so far? Robots.txt? Weird? Okay. I think this is everything I just said. All right, so Scrapy respects robots.txt by default. It's a switch you can turn off, but it's on by default. And if you scrape a website with BeautifulSoup, it doesn't know to check the robots.txt, let alone parse it and figure out like what it means, you know. So this is one win for Scrapy in my book. Right. So getting started, right? So in this case, we're imagining that, you know, like maybe we've cloned my repo, and we've certainly installed Scrapy by this point, right? Pip install Scrapy should work fine. Although on Windows systems, I remember Scrapy, it has dependencies on C++ code, so like you have to have the Visual Studio stuff installed in order for it to work. So yeah, that's been a pain point for me when I was on Windows. But anyway, so when you're working on something in Scrapy, basically what you do is you make a project. So you run, you know, Scrapy start project baby names, and then that just creates a folder called baby names, and you know it fills it up with stuff that's useful. Basically, you get these 3 files: items, middlewares, and pipelines, which I won't really talk about because they're sort of more advanced features. Basically, like Scrapy can be used as an engine to kind of asynchronously download things like from the internet. So like you might have a crawler that's collecting links for things that you want to download, like they could be videos or or audio or something, and then those links can be kind of passed off to an engine that's sort of like grabbing them and downloading them as fast as it can. So that machinery is controlled by those 3 files. The settings.py has the stuff that I told you about, throttling the connections, defining your user agent, whether you obey robots.txt or not, that's in there. And then the spiders folder has that's where you write your scrapers, basically. So yeah, that's how that works. And that's everything I just said. Right, so this is the top of settings.py. So, settings.py, pick a name. These things are just kind of defaults. Well, I mean, obviously they're derived from the name of the project, right? Babynames.spiders. It's because you called the project baby names. And then in my case, my user agent, I pointed it to my repo and then gave my email. So again, if you want to be good gentlemen and ladies, then if you fork the code and then run it, then change the user agent. Or else they'll contact me. They'll say, "Why is this code running blah blah blah?" And I'll say, "Yeah, don't look at me. It's not my fault." So robots.txt obey equals true, right? So there's that switch that I told you about. And then also concurrent connections equals 4, download delay equals 3. Interestingly, you can set a download delay, right? So every time it downloads a web page, it will wait a certain amount of time. But interestingly, Scrapy is smart enough that wait is actually it's random. So it's 3 seconds plus or minus some random amount, so that basically it makes you look less bot. So it does that for you, which is great. And then concurrent requests. If you've got enough, if you've got a fast enough connection, and likewise the remote also has a fast enough connection, then there's no reason you couldn't use Scrapy to start some crazy amount of concurrent requests and download super fast. So, which is also neat. So having made a project, you then make a spider. Okay. And in Scrapy, the spiders are the programs that actually do the web scraping. That's the bit that you write, that you tailor towards whatever your task is. And in this case, you just run Scrapy genspider huggies.co.nz. Right? So you just give the spider a name, Huggies in this case, and then you give it a domain to point at. And what this does is it creates a file called spiders/huggies.py, and spiders/huggies.py has these contents by default. So this is your basic bare bones spider that does nothing. So you get your class Huggies spider. It has a name. This is another cool thing. It has a list of allowed domains. So this is so that your web scraper doesn't wind up in the open internet and start crawling like mad. which if you were traversing a website and then grabbing links and then just following them, it's something that can easily happen, So Scrapy is set up so that doesn't happen to you by default, which is great. And then you also pick the URL. So the start URL in this case is huggies.co.nz. I actually modify that to hit all of the letters, right? So I go huggies.co.nz/babynames/A and B and C and so on and so on. So I do that, and then I think the next slide. And then this pass method at the bottom, basically the way that pass works is that's the one that runs once it's fetched the website. So when you write huggies_spider.pass, then you're imagining that I'm in the website, I've got my response that has all my HTML stuff, and at that point you're looking to fetch the data, right? So you have to. So I'll talk about that next. But that's what happens in pass. The pass method returns one of two things. It either returns a response. No, it either returns a dict. So a Python dictionary containing the data that you want from the website. So that's option 1. Option 2 is that it returns not a dict but a request, which is a request that points to another website, and that request has to have a callback that goes to a pass method. So the idea is you either return the data or you return a request to get data from another page with a label that tells Huggies Spider which method to process that request once it comes through. So I'll explain that a little more later. But yeah, so these are all things I said. Yeah, the bottom thing especially. Right, so I've just modified Huggy's spider. So yeah, the start URLs is what I've changed. So, start URL equals this, plus the letter for all the letters in the alphabet. Right, yeah, fairly straightforward. And then, so what's going to happen now is that when you run Huggy Spider, it's going to start by getting all of these, like every single one of these links, and following them, requesting them, and then once it receives those responses, then it will run pass on each one, and yeah, that's how it works. Right. So this machinery is like really useful once you've got the code written. So like you'll see, I hope, that once the program is finished, that it will be it should be straightforward to interpret like how it works, But the problem is how do you get to that point? So like, and this is the thing that it took me a while to figure out how it is that this works on Scrapy. But yeah, so I'm going to show you now. And the way that it works is that the Scrapy package comes with an interactive shell. Okay? And so what you can do is you can run in the command line, Scrapy shell, and then the link that you want to go to. And then what it will do is it will simulate a request for that website, and then basically drop you in a console where you're ready to run everything as if you were inside the pass method. Okay? So that's how that works. So if I run Scrapy shell huggies.co.nz, then I get a Python interpreter here, a REPL, that has the variables that it got from that website. So it has response, and the response is the response from when it tried to get this website. I say tried because like maybe you got the link wrong and then it took you to a 404 or something like that. But that's how this works. So the workflow is that you set up the project, you make the spider, you run the shell, you go to one of the pages, shouldn't matter which, and then you use the REPL to test out your code that you're going to put in pass when you're done. Okay? Yeah, so that's how that works. So yeah, so from inside the shell, you can see everything the spider can see. Usually the goal is to handle the response object so that you either get the data you want or any URLs to the next place, to any other place you want to go. Right? So like I'm in there, I've sent my request, got my response. Either the response is the data I want, or it will have some other place that I can go to get the data I want. And you can
combine them both, and you might get some data as well as some further links as well.
Yeah, you can. You do that using yield statements. So like sometimes you'll yield dicts, and then sometimes you'll yield URLs. And Scrapy knows like, oh, this is a dict, so that's output data, and this is a request, so I'll send that off. Yeah. Yeah. So imagining that I'm in that REPL still, if I run print response.body, then the first 500 characters looks like this. It's just the HTML from the website. So that kind of proves the point that like you're just in this environment, you got your response, you just manipulate it. And if your attempt to get the website failed, then this thing would say something. It would say, maybe your title tag will say page not found or something like that. So yeah, you might check out the response like that. But here, okay, so this shot is here so that I can point out those things more easily. So at the bottom, you can see there are those page numbers. And then at the top, there's the letters. I've already hit all the letters, right? Because I wrote in the starts URLs, I wrote that thing that that gets all the links. So that's easy. And then you've also got all of the names and all of the genders. I skipped the origins just because I try to keep the code short. And yeah, and then you've got these pages at the bottom. So yeah. And the way that I set up the project is that for every page, I just take all of the names and take all of the genders. And I also take all of the page links at the bottom, just all of them. You could like isolate the next page and then just take that one. But the reason you don't do that is because Scrapy can run asynchronously, you want to give it more than one link at once so that it can just like decide for itself where it wants to go, based on like what it's doing at the moment. If you give it only the next page, then it's kind of like, oh, I have to go to that page before I can find the link for the page after, and then your asynchronicity just kind of collapses into just like linear stuff. So yeah, so that's useful. Yeah?
In that case, when you get to page 2, does it know not to go to scan page 1 again?
Great question. The answer is yes. Yeah, so if Scrapy gets 2 requests for the same link, it only does it once and it ignores later requests. Yeah, so I didn't hit that in the slides, so thanks for asking. Okay. Right, so pagination. What's the word? Right. Okay. I should open a browser. So, right, yeah, this is good. This is interesting. So let's try this. Let's go huggies.co.nz/babynames/a. Ha! Am I spelling it wrong?
Baby-names.
Thank you. Baby-names. Yeah, you got it. Thanks, kind sir. Right, so here's the website, right? And now the question is, we know how to request a website, and now we're inside the pass method, but like, how do we find the things that we want? And the answer is like, you open up a browser, and then you use your inspect element tool. So, right-click your link, and then go inspect element. And in this case, I'm interested in finding those tags for the bottom, for those buttons at the bottom there. And so if I scroll through here, I can see, oh, look, there's all of the buttons being highlighted. And and this thing gets the whole lot. So if I go right-click, copy, and then XPath, then I get this long string that looks like this in our case. I don't know if you can read it, but it says /HTML/body/div2/div2/div3/div2. So basically what this thing is, it's called an XPath, and what the XPath is it's basically like it's a sequence of steps along the tree that makes up the website that tells you how to get from the root node all the way to wherever the thing is that you want. So it's like start at the HTML tag, which is like, the whole website is inside a big HTML tag. And then inside that HTML tag, find the body tag. And inside that body tag, find the second div. And inside that second div, find the second div inside that div, and the second div inside that, and then the third. So
Does it give you indexed versions, or does it have naming?
it does give you, so the website will give you index versions by default. But XPath has a syntax whereby you can select elements by class or by ID. And I show that in the slides. And so basically, my go-to, because I'm a tad pedantic, is I take the raw XPath, and then I try to logically deduce what the right class and whatever is, so that I'm getting exactly the thing I need and nothing else. The other thing that's also worth mentioning is that each of these tags is numbered, but if you remove the number, then what you get is you get a list with every tag that's at that level of that type, So yeah, I'll explain a bit about how that works. But yeah, so on this page, so I imagine that I did what I just did, and in the browser, and then I got an XPath, and the raw XPath is this one here. So yeah, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, and then A1. So that A1 contains this number 2 here. Well, actually, no, it contains this whole tag. But the reason I want that tag is because it has an href that has the URL that I want to go to. Yeah, so I had to you had to do some clicking in the browser to try and find the thing, but yeah, that's how I got this XPath. And then if you go inside the Scrapy shell, if you run response.xpath, and then you give that XPath string, then you go .extract, and then you get the raw text. If you don't use .extract, then what you get is basically a tag object that itself can be indexed using XPath. So that you can kind of have a root tag that contains all of the pages, and then under that you might have other tags. So you can do that as well. But yeah, so this page XPath is just the XPath for just that one button that has the number 2 on it. and its href is here. But yeah, so this is kind of the, what's the word? Like I suppose you'd say the nasty part of like Scrapy, right? Like the code gets real compact and simple, but only because a lot of the kind of complex syntax is being done by this XPath stuff. Yeah? So yeah. So the XPath at the top and the XPath at the bottom, they're equivalent, and this answers the question that the person asked about referencing by class. So here I decided that instead of starting from the root tag and then going all the way to where I want, I can just say, I'll just take the div that has the class pagination, and then the first A tag under that div will be the one that has page number 2 on it. So like, yeah. And the way that I figured that out is by going here and then, can I now? Oh yeah, that works. Right, so in here, this is the A tag for that number 2 button, and then the div above it has a class of pagination. So like that's basically how I found it. So I was like, okay, select the div that has class pagination, and then blah blah blah. So yeah. Right. So what we've just achieved is we've found the div for that particular button. And then that A tag was indexed with 1, meaning we wanted the first one, but all the other ones are there, so we might as well take them. So if we go A, and if we remove that A1 and we just put A there, then we get the tags. We get the tags for all of the buttons, from 2 to 166 up to next. Yeah? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 165, 166. Yeah. So I get all of those. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to extract the href from the tag, and that's done like this. So you take the XPath from before, and then you add the @ href, and then that pulls the href out of the A tag, and then you just get the strings that have the URLs. And this is the win, like, yeah, that's what you want. Right. Yeah, so by default, a spider, it will have a pass method, and that pass method is special in the sense that it's always the one that it will go to first once it gets to the website. So like, yeah, it's called pass. And but you can have multiple pass methods, and they can all kind of pass PASS things, between each other. And yeah. So here it's like the idea is that the pass method is going to get all of the page numbers, and then it's going to PASS, those requests to pass page, which will actually get the data. So that's how I segmented it in this case. I could have done it so that it was like, so that pass extracted the data from that page and then also requested another page that somehow fed back to itself and did things. Like, that's fine if you like recursion, but yeah. And so this is what the pass method looks like. So we get the XPath, we get the page URLs, we extract them. And then for every URL in page URLs, we join the URL for that page onto our response. Like the response.url join just takes, the website I'm at now, and then appends whatever URL you put onto the end for it, which works for us because, we've got the /baby names, page equals 2. So yeah, basically URL join will just do that cleverly for you. And then you yield this spacey.request. So yield spacey.request, the URL you want to go to, and then you have to set a callback, which is equal to the pass method that you want that request to go to, which in this case is pass page. Yeah. So now we've figured out how to get all the pages, and now next we want to get the data from each page once we've got there, once we've arrived. Yeah. And so now what I'm doing is I'm getting a new XPath that gets me the data instead of the URL. And like getting that would look the same. So I would go here, and then I'd right click on a name, inspect element, and then it'll tell me where to look, get an XPath. And now I've got a new XPath string that basically forms the, it forms the basis of my investigations. Like I'll start simplifying that string, and then once I've done that, then I'll be content. Yeah. So this is the XPath that I got from the website, that long thing. And then you'll notice that if I extract it, then I get the href for the page. But most importantly, I get the name. In this case, I want the name, and not the link. And yeah. So this bit at the bottom is just me simplifying that long thing by like kind of cutting it at this point. So I just care about the table bit onwards. Basically, what you do is you kind of look at the XPath and you try to clip it off at the bit that looks unique. Because if there were other table nodes in the thing, then this probably wouldn't be a good place to cut it off. Like you'd pick somewhere else. But you can also, if you want, totally ignore this task of trying to simplify XPaths and just include the raw thing. And that's not a bad idea if you're just starting off and you don't understand how the syntax works. Because your code will still work. And it probably will still work in a week's time as well, so long as you tested it well. I know, in 6 months' time. Yeah. Right, so this is another example. So here, I'm simplifying. Well, I'm not simplifying it. I'm sort of making it more complicated, but I'm removing the indexing and replacing it with select by class, which at least when you're reading the code, it will look more obvious what you're doing. So class equals name. Okay, I understand that. In fact, now that that's there, maybe you can clip it from there. I'm not sure. But if you run that XPath through, also important is that I've ended the XPath with the text, open bracket, close bracket. That's what gets the name out and not the tag. Yeah. Wait, so what's going on here? All right, so this is me removing the indexing so that I don't just get the first name, I get all of them. And then this is me adding the text on the end so that I get the names. And now you see I get the list of names, So this is the data that I want, basically. And then having cleaned up this XPath, it turns out that the other XPath is very similar. It's the same one as before, but just with the class changed. So that's an easy win, right? So you just make a simple modification to this tag and to this XPath, and then you get all of the genders as well. And the order is just arranged as the order of the website. So I think the thing that I realized when I did scraping for a little while was that the people who write the website, they have to write it in code. And because they have to write it in code, they have to use some sort of structure. Because if they didn't, then they're making their lives harder. And the whole point of doing web scraping is to kind of exploit that structure or try to figure it out for yourself so that you can kind of get the data that you want. Yeah. So this is the pass page method. It has two XPaths this time, the one for getting the names and the one for getting the genders. And each XPath is passed off to it's extracted into a list of names and genders. So I just do that separately. And then for name, gender, and zip names and genders yield this dict. And then that's it. So this is the bit that does the last bit of work. And now that this is written, we just have to compose it into, huggies.py, and then we're basically done. So, yeah, so now that the script is done, we just run scrapy crawl huggies, and I think it goes to output.json if you don't give an output, but in this case I called it babynames.csv. If you call the output.csv, it will just format it itself. This is what the logs look like. They're very verbose, but it can be satisfying to watch. You hit enter, and then all the links, it says, I found this URL and this URL, and at this URL I found this data, and if your code has errors, then your errors will be displayed in the logs, and it will try to keep going, that sort of thing. And at the end, you get the summary of I scraped this many pages, and I sent this many requests, and this many were denied, or that sort of thing. I got this many 404 errors. All of that stuff will be displayed here. And then this here is the script from start to finish. So this is huggies.py. So just about 30 lines. You set your name, allow domain start URLs. I only change the start URLs, right? the names and the allowed domains were just set. And then the pass method is here, and then there's the pass page. And that's about, once you've written this, then you're pretty much done. Yeah? And it's pretty easy to maintain, and because we took the effort to like clean up the XPaths, you kind of have a little more of a sense of like what it's doing, which is useful. And then this is the data we get. So you just get a big CSV, serial boy, serial girl. Because Scrapy scrapes asynchronously, your data will just be in whatever order it got, you know. So yeah, don't worry about that. And here's a random sample. So we've got 15 random boy names, 15 random girl names, and 15 random unisex names. And they are random, you know. I mean, of course they are. You know, like why wouldn't I just write the code to do it? So yeah. And then this is my kind of my $10 plot. You know, like mostly boys, also girls, also unisex, and that's the thing. But yeah, so any questions or anything else? How are we doing for time? Still got a lot of time. That's good. Yeah.
What about TLS and cookies?
Oh right, cookies. Okay, so I have simulated logins and that in Scrapy before. They're not that bad to do once you know how to do them, but like I feel like the documentation is a bit sparse. So like, yeah, I don't even remember how I did it. Yeah, I just like, okay, I know I have a project in here somewhere. I'm not sure I'm that. But yeah, it is possible to log into websites, and like I haven't tried to pass a token to a website, but I have like the way I simulated logging in was I went to the login website and then like I found the fields and then I like sent you know I like posted the password and that to those places. Yeah, so you can do it basically, but the answer is I hardly remember, because most of the things I scrape are kind of public domain. And the reason for that is because they are the things that I'm the most comfortable with the legality. Yeah. Yeah. I had a story, wait. Oh no, it's a slightly different thing. Yeah. Yeah, because like some websites, you know, they'll try to stop you from crawling. And like some of them can be quite inventive. I remember there was one website that like they had a thing where you couldn't right click on the web page. It would just put up a dialogue that told you you're not allowed to do that.
Go to the menu and then go to inspect.
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that sort of thing. So yeah, and I remember another one that was kind of interesting. I think there's the what's the word? Like gun violence dataset that's maintained by a website in the US. But that it's interesting because like it has this, like sometimes websites they structure themselves like adversarially, right? So like they have like hashes in their names like for the pages and stuff, so that you can't just infer like, oh, I'm at page 1, so I should go to page 2. It's like, no. Yeah, so that sort of thing also happens. But yeah, anyway.
In the case where you got all of your links at the bottom, if the next link, I noticed that it was still page 2, the hyperlink for the next actually page 2.
Yep.
But if it was actually, if the URL was actually /next, and on the server they figured out that it was going to be the next page for you, so the URL was different.
Yeah.
But when you actually got the page back, it was the same as before. So Scrapy wouldn't know before it hit the page that it had seen this page before.
Yeah.
Would you get duplicate output? Would you?
I'm not sure. I mean, Scrapy does follow. Well, Scrapy can be instructed to follow redirects and stuff. Actually, yeah, there is one thing, which is that like if you're using the items and pipelines like machinery, then those do hash checking.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so if you did get the same website, or like if you were downloading files, then it would be checking them for hashes, and then you wouldn't get duplicates. yeah, so. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned before about like, giving value back to the data.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. This graph seems like one of those things, one of the pieces of value that you've created from the data.
Yeah, that's right. And like I was tempted to go a bit further, but I thought like, that's not really in this, that's not really what this is about, Like one thing that I was curious about was like last letters in the names. What's that distribution look like? Do girls' names mostly end with A and that sort of thing? The main reason I didn't think it was worth doing was because in this case, the data, there's not population weights in there, it's just like, here's an arbitrary list of names, so like, yeah, I think that when people think about questions like that, they're really more interested in like names of people and like how many people there are with a certain name, but this isn't one of those data sets. But like, but anyway, I've totally sidetracked from your question, which is about providing value back to the website owners. And like, I thought it was important enough to put up there. But when I think about stuff that I've done, so little of the web scraping stuff that I've ever done has ever left my machine. Most of it has just been like, oh, that was interesting, and then like I go on to the next thing, pretty much. It's certainly the case that like, were I hypothetically to finally get around to writing any of these many blog posts that I've thought of writing on all of these various things, then obviously links to the websites would be like in there. But yeah, and I'm still not like, even though TradeMe's robots.txt doesn't forbid you from scraping in certain ways, like it does forbid you from like using the search function. So you're allowed to scrape the website, but you're not allowed to like simulate click on the search button. So that's interesting. But the website has enough structure that you can kind of get to where you want to go, like without worrying about that. Yeah.
TradeMe does have an API, so is there a time you would scrape as opposed to using the API, or?
That's actually a really good question, and the answer is that I looked at the API documentation, I couldn't make heads or tails of it, and that's why I did it this way, because I'm good at this. But yeah, so that's my situation. But but really you should use the API, and like.
Would you be authenticated to use the API?
Oh, I think you do. Yeah. Actually, that's the main thing, right? That's the main obstacle. Like, if you want to use the API, you have to like tell them what you want it for, and that sort of thing, which is also like.
But a barrier to entry, even though you can see the data yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I don't know, but that's, yeah. You do. You have to say what you want it for and like stuff, but. Yeah, it becomes weird when you're like, I just like kind of want to know, like how many rentals are there in New Zealand? Where has the most and the least? Most obviously Auckland, but the least Gisborne, if I recall. Yeah.
Sorry, relatively new to this group, but you may have talked about this earlier, but what are some of the risks that are involved in taking web scraping? You say it hasn't left your computer, but with sort of data privacy, what's sort of embedded in?
Yeah, so basically, what's the word? Like, web scraping is, I don't know. I mean, I shouldn't put a label to it, right? Like, people just do it. And like, I shouldn't call it grey hat or anything. So I'm glad I did it. But this slide is the one that has the stuff about the ethics. And so basically, there is a bunch of kind of commonly agreed practices with regards to scraping websites. The main priority is not to be a nuisance to the site owners. That's the thing that, like, once you start doing that, then you can get yourself in trouble. There are also obvious issues around intellectual property and all that sort of stuff. And so for those things, like, you have to think about whether or not your intentions are pure, right? Like, are you scraping the website because, like, there's some sort of, I don't know. I just scrape things because I want to sometimes, but like, You know, like just because I'm just a curious person, and like sometimes I've got a project, and the thing that's between me and finding out the answer is a website, right? So like in my case, the case I gave before was lotto numbers, and so there are obvious questions that like, don't you want to know, right? Like which numbers occur the most often, you know? Is there any bias, you know? And it turns out that in the main draw, no, but in the Powerball, maybe. Yeah. So like, yeah. Yeah, and like these are things that I managed to answer because I can kind of do this stuff. But just to like give more information, Powerball results, like if I recall, it's biased towards the low numbers. So like 1, 2, 3, 4 more likely than 7, 8, 9. And I think it's to do with the design of that machine, right? Because like the balls like kind of come up in order, and then they kind of collapse into the thing, and then the thing comes down, and then they spin, and then that's my theory, you know? Because like if you look at the data, it's like there's more on, you know, it sort of has that shape where it's like but yeah. Yeah, but in the main draw, it's like, it doesn't look like there's anything, but and there's also like, obviously, you know, you don't want to, what's that thing that they say? I can't remember the line, but you know, past performance not an indication of future results, right? Like they could change the design of the machine in some subtle way tomorrow that just means that any results you come up with are just totally invalid. So, but it doesn't stop me from wanting to ask. The other question I also had was like, how many people play the lotto? Which is a question that you should be able to get estimates on from the number of winners which they publish. You know, because like you've got all these different games, people win, people lose. The number of winners gets published. The number of winners, because it's probabilistic, depends on the odds of winning and the number of people who play. Right, so you can use those two things together. Like, yeah, and like what I found for that was that, you know, you've got like this kind of consistent thing, and then you get this drop, which is sort of obvious because that's when they went from 1 draw a week to 2 draws a week, and that. So, yeah. Anyway.
So if you're wanting to take some information that is on a proprietary website that the owners want people to go to their site to get the data from, but you want it to be free and you want to republish it in a way that you possibly can't take it back again after you publish what they paid to put together. Yeah. I take it that's where you can get into a lot of trouble? Or
yeah, pretty much.
Just a little thing? Yeah,
like I don't know if you've heard of Aaron Schwartz, but just don't Aaron Schwartz yourself. So like basically what he did was he set up in my head, pretty much a web scraper, you know, like he set up a web scraper inside of the university campus, which authenticated to their network so that he could access all of the academic journals. And then he collected as many academic journals as he could and then published them. Yeah, because like for obvious ethical reasons, right? Like to do with, you know, paywalls and, you know, freedom of knowledge and stuff. But yeah, so things like that have happened in the past, and like people, like if you know anything about Aaron Schwartz, you know, the feds went down on him very hard. Yeah, to say the least. So.
I don't think he actually published anything.
Oh, didn't he? No. Oh, okay, I'm glad you said that. But yeah, it was within his power.
Yeah. He did the same thing to a legal repository, which was behind paywalls in America. Right. It's publicly available. So the Fed said, well, he's already done it once for research purposes. He's bound to do it again, and that's it all went bad.
But yeah, like kind of anecdotally, what I found is that most websites are kind of fine with scraping so long as you scrape them in ways that they can control, you know? So, yeah, like I wouldn't write a web scraper for Wikipedia, for example, because Wikipedia has such a good API. That's like another thing. And also they've got lots of documentation about web scraping them and like, well, more like using the API and what amount of requests per second is a reasonable amount and that sort of thing. Basically, if I recall, their website said don't use concurrency. Yeah, so long as your code's not concurrent, you're probably scraping fast enough. You know? So, But yeah, I don't know what else to say. If anyone's curious, the stuff that I'm working on at the moment, yeah, it's not really web scraping stuff. I'm working on machine learning for Māori language. And it's the sort of thing that I would obviously talk about at a place like this, except that like as consultants, we don't really own the work. You know, like the work is like owned by the people who are paying us, and so it's more their responsibility to talk about it. But like I'll talk about it, you know, over coffees or whatever. But yeah, so this was something safe. This is something that like, yeah, it's one of the tricky things about working for a consulting firm, where like, yeah, who owns your work kind of thing becomes an issue.
Awesome.
Anyway.
Thank you so much, Kellen.
Thanks.